Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
And welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Back to the Father, a production of the Guadalupe Radio Network. It is May 12th, 2023, the day before the important feast day of Our Lady of Fatima. Thanks for joining us. This is a show about the restoration of Christian philosophy according to the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas, as was laid out by Pope Leo XIII in his famous encyclical from 1879 called Aeterni Patris, the restoration of Christian philosophy. He saw what was going on back then, and he said we need to return to basic principles of scholastic, solid philosophy. And so that is what this program is all about. We welcome you. We thank you for joining us. This is only on social media. It's podcasted. It is on YouTube. It's on Facebook. And it's also on Twitter. And so if you are on any of those platforms, please comment. It's a very interactive show. And you also, if you would like, you can call in as well. We sometimes get a call or two, and you're very welcome to do that. 877-757-9424 is the phone number, 877-757-9424. And the name of the show is referring to the fact that we're all on a journey, okay? We're created by God, and we are drawn back to God. And if our life is successful, if we achieve our end, then we will return back to the Father in bliss and glory and ultimate happiness, right? My name is Dave Palmer, host of this program. I'm a big fan of St. Thomas Aquinas because he's taught me about God. He's taught me a lot about life and how to see the world differently through a Christian perspective. And Cecil Anderson, our wonderful, wonderful producer, is not here today, but she left us so well prepared. She left step-by-step instructions, so we're very grateful. She's actually traveling with some friends up to a college commencement, or a graduation ceremony, I should say, over the weekend. So thanks to her, a well-deserved little break, but she has put in her place our production manager, Manny Ortiz. And thank you, Manny, for being here today. I don't know if you want to contribute or be part of the conversation or just kind of be in the background. But
I'll see what I can.
So last segment, we do open it up and we talk about things. And, of course, our wonderful high school intern, William Kirkendall, is here doing a little bit more than he typically does. He'll be contributing a lot. Very bright young man in the third segment. And he's also handling the PowerPoint graphics and all that kind of stuff. So, William, good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
All right. So here is what, this first graphic on the show says, "You think, therefore, you are a philosopher." Of course, it harkens back to René Descartes and his famous saying from his work, "I think, therefore, I am." We are thinking people, okay? And it's philosophy is so important. I think not enough people learn philosophy early enough in life. I'm a big believer that 5-year-old children should be taught philosophy by their parents and in school. Most people never take a philosophy course in their life, and maybe if they do, they go to a good Catholic college and they start it when they're 18 or 19 years old. It's got to be taught. Seminarians, before they take theology, they take philosophy, because philosophy has to do with training the natural reason, that our God-given reason, how to think, how to, just see life and order it and make sense of it. And then once you've kind of learned how to think, then you can move on to supernatural things. And that is what theology is. It's more focused on the supernatural rather than the natural. So that is what it's all about. And let me tell you what the program is going to be about today. I'm very excited. I had a chance on Catholic Drive Time this morning with Adrian and Tito to give a little preview of this. Adrian seemed to be pretty excited about it, and these are good topics. They're kind of deep, but the purpose of this program is to try to take deep topics and make it very digestible, very understandable, so that it makes sense to you, because it's very important. So the first segment, approximately 20 minutes, we're going to be talking about divine simplicity. Okay, what does St. Thomas Aquinas mean by saying in his very, very first description of God that God is simple? Okay, before saying God is love or God is good or God is perfect or he's infinite or he's eternal, he says God is simple. So why did he start with that? Why not the other ones? Okay, we'll talk about that. And then in segment 2, we are going to review the philosophy of William of Ockham. He is an English Franciscan philosopher that came right after Aquinas. In fact, I'll show you a little timeline of the philosophers that we've studied so far. We are going to focus in on what he referred to as Occam's razor, and also the very problematic philosophy called nominalism. I watched a really good video about 4 times this week that I highly recommend. A professor from Christendom College, his name is Dr. John Cuddeback, and he was speaking at the Institute of Catholic Culture, which I think is based out of Washington, D.C., and giving a talk called What's in a Name? I think that's what it was called. It was about the problems of nominalism, and it's fabulous. And so if I can try to explain what Dr. Cuddeback was explaining at a little bit higher of a level, if I can bring it down a little bit so everybody understands it, the dangers of nominalism and why nominalism, the logical consequence of it is what we're seeing today, where people don't know how to think. They think they can create themselves, from men into women or women into men or, children into squirrels or furries or, it's nuts. Things are crazy right now. But as, Adrian pointed out in the show this morning, I thought his analogy was really good. I said, if you don't go back to the source of the problem, you're never going to be able to figure out the solution of the problem. And Adrian said, yeah, it's kind of like if you have a pipe leak underneath your house and all you do is mop up the floor in the kitchen every day, and you never go to the source of the problem and fix that leak, well, you're just going to constantly be mopping and mopping and mopping. This was Adrian's comparison. I thought it was a great analogy. Okay, so what we're doing is we're seeing all the problems in the culture, and we're like, why is everything so crazy? Well, go back to the source. And I'm going to suggest and hopefully convince you in this show that one of the sources of the problems today is nominalism. Okay, and William of Ockham didn't invent nominalism, but he kind of perfected it, and he came right after the Scholastics, and as Dr. Cuddeback says, he kind of pulled the rug out from scholasticism and sent us on a pretty sinister journey into some pretty crazy philosophy like we're dealing with right now. So anyways, that's the deal, and as we go through it, comment. As soon as you comment, William will jump in and he'll let us know what you're thinking. But don't think you're bugging us by commenting or asking a question. That's what the whole show is about. It's supposed to be very interactive. All right, so the next slide is just Aquinas and the Summa. This is what the program is about, taking principles of the Summa Theologica, which I have studied and taught for the last 10 years, mostly to high school kids. And I have found that it has really made a big impact on people and in their Christian walk. And so I want to try to share some of these insights to you every week during this hour. All right, the next slide kind of puts everything in a kind of a timeline perspective. You remember 2 weeks ago we talked about, we started off with Friedrich Nietzsche, and he's a 19th century existentialist, atheist, German philosopher. We talked about the Superman and the will to power and God is dead and all that. Okay, he came after everybody else that we've been talking about. Okay, last week it was Blaise Pascal and his Pascal's wager and these kind of things. He wasn't too bad. He was a Christian. He was a zealous Christian. And of course we have Aquinas in the 13th century, and so Occam kind of fits right in between all these people. Okay, he's 14th century. He's the time, if you want to put it in a historical perspective, he would have been a contemporary of, I believe, Duns Scotus would have lived right before him. He was the time of the Avignon papacy, where the papacy was moved from Rome to Avignon, France, and so he actually got excommunicated. And it wasn't necessarily because of his teachings, but it's a little complicated. But he did get excommunicated in, I think, 1328, but I'll tell you more about that in just a second. All right, so that's the timeline. William of Ockham we'll be talking about in the segment second today. All right, so if I were to, on the next slide here, William, ask you, who is God? What is God? All right, this is something that Aquinas was very interested in as he started off his Summa. I've mentioned before, 3,000 articles, 631, 631 questions approximately in the Summa. So he wants to start off by, first of all, saying, okay, if our whole life is, from God to God, exitus, reditus, we better figure out right off the bat who is God and what God is in the first place, okay? So, first article has to do with sacred doctrine. Our end is beyond us. God has to teach us about our final end through sacred doctrine, because otherwise we wouldn't even know where we're supposed to go to heaven, because it's a supernatural thing. And then in question number 2, as we talked about last week, the famous proofs for the existence of God. Okay, that's prima pars. Question 2, Article 3, okay, the 5 proofs for the existence of God that we went over rather quickly. So when I say who is God, what is God, what comes to mind? I mean, do you have an image in your mind? And go ahead and type it up if you want, and William will tell me what y'all say. One-word explanation, most people will say love or mercy, or they might have an image in their mind of this on the next slide, this, bearded old man up in heaven, because, we're sensible creatures. And so we have to, in order to picture things like God, even though he's totally immaterial and purely spiritual, we have to kind of paint him somehow. We have to put somehow make him sensible so that we can understand him. And so this is typically how we kind of portray him, as the old man with a white beard up in heaven. And, nothing terribly wrong with that, but it's a little bit limited. All right. So as this slide says, Thomas, in question 3, after proving that God exists, he says, okay, let's start describing God. What are his attributes? What is he like? And, he's infinite, and he's immutable, and he's one, and he's simple. He's good, and he's eternal. But the very first thing he gets into, and I'm going to go ahead and skip this next one, is let's go straight to the simplicity of God. And it's question 3. Okay, so Thomas is going to go right off the bat. Let's talk about the simplicity of God. What does this mean? Okay, how can God, who has to answer, 6 billion prayers and run a universe and do so many things, how can he be simple? Okay, see, it seems kind of complicated, right? It seems like it's a very complicated life, but it's just the opposite. God is perfectly simple. It's just that our limitations, the limitations of our knowledge, because we can't understand God, it makes it simple. Because for us, if we had 10,000 things to do, it would seem very complicated. But with God, it's all done with great simplicity. So I'm just going to very quickly comment on these different articles that Thomas has here, and give you a little bit of information on each one of these, okay, real quickly. And so what does it mean for him to be simple? Okay, Article 1, he says whether God is a body. Okay, and you probably know that God not only is not a body, he doesn't have a body, he doesn't have parts. There's no composite with him like us, being body and soul, matter and form, spirit and body. With God, he's pure spirit. You can't touch him, you can't do anything, change him. And then in Article 2, he says, is God composed of matter and form? Okay, everything that we see in the world, everything that we can sense, okay, from my phone to this piece of paper to, the mouse I'm holding with my right hand to this bottle of water, everything has matter and form, okay? The form is kind of what gives it its essence, what it is, and the matter is just the material aspect of it, okay? So God does not have matter and form. Everything that has matter and form has to come together. And so if God had matter and form, that means that he would be like a creature. There would be a before and an after, okay? So you would eliminate eternity, you would eliminate a lot of his attributes if he did have a body and form, and matter and form, I should say. Okay, so now Article 3 is when it gets a little complex, and he says, is God the same as his essence or nature? All right, so take somebody like William, okay? William is William Kirkendall, okay? He's a human being, and that's his essence. He has human nature, but he is not his nature, because his nature is human nature. William is not humanity. Okay, because if he was humanity, then what am I? Because I'm sharing humanity with him. Okay, so he is a representative of humanity, and he has human nature, but he is not humanity. Just like this phone I'm holding is not phone, overall, because there's all kinds of phones out there. But God is his own nature, his own essence. And then it gets a little more interesting in Article 4, because then he says, okay, is essence and existence the same in God? All right, so I have the essence of a human being, I have human nature, and I exist. But those are two different things, okay? Because there was one time when I didn't exist, and so, but with me, existence is a separate thing than my essence and my nature. But with God, it's all the same. In fact, with God, everything is the same, okay? His nature, his essence, his intellect, his will, his being, his love, his mercy. God just is. God is existence, all right? And I know it's complicated, but as I always like to say, rather than saying, oh, gosh, I just want to go back to thinking of that old white-haired guy, bearded guy up in heaven. What it should do is give you a sense of awe, a sense of wonder, a sense of like, wow, this is amazing. This is the God that created the world. This is the God that I get to worship. This is the God who comes to us in the form of the appearance, I should say, of bread and wine at Mass. I mean, this is pretty cool. This is what I get to actually consume at Mass. And so that should really be the sentiment that you have. Okay, so Article 5, is God contained in a genus? We like to categorize everything. We have genus and species and all that. He is not a genus. Okay, God just is. He created all the genuses, all the species. He's not a genus himself. Okay, are there accidents in God? Okay, we have accidents like our size, our shape, our the different color of hair that we have, and all the different things that are not essential to our essence. God doesn't have any accidents. Okay, he just is. And then article number 7 is, if you're just going to read one of these articles sometime, go straight to 7. Because it's kind of a summary of, is God altogether simple? And as you can probably imagine, he's going to say, yes, God is altogether simple, and here's why, all the reasons we've already mentioned. And interestingly, and I love this, in Article 8, he's now described God's simplicity, and then he goes into, okay, how does this relate to creation? Okay, we've got God, we've explained a lot of him, it's a little confusing, but he says, does God enter into the composition of other things? Okay, so is God in this water bottle? Is God, in this mouse? Is God in the bird that just flew by our building? Okay, is he in it? And what would you say about that? Do you think God is in those things? Like, is he their essence? And the answer is no. Okay, because those things have their own essence. Now, God keeps them in existence through his power, but they have their own essence, okay? Because if he was in them, then we would worship them. And then we would be pantheists and heretics, and we'd have to be burned at the stake, okay? And we don't want that, all right? So, because God, again, that's something that other, religions believe. I think it's common to like maybe Hinduism, that you have all these gods, okay, like the sacred cow, right? But God is not in these things, in the composition of them, because he, in his goodness, has given them their own essence, okay? So, all right, what is 19 minutes after the hour? And I don't know if anybody has commented yet. This is a good time to comment if you want to say anything about this. Does divine simplicity make sense to you? Is there anything about what I just said that kind of makes your head spin? Or is it like, I think I can understand that? It's something to, dig in and just read an article or two of the Summa and see if it makes sense, take it to prayer, because it's really fascinating. I don't think we think enough about God and his attributes. And of course, this is just one of 7, not even counting things like his knowledge and his will and his providence and predestination and all these other things that St. Thomas Aquinas deals with. All right, so I see Sissel is watching. She said, howdy, guys. Good to have Adrian with us as well. I'm sure Adrian's going to have some comments as well as we move on. So, all right, Divine Simplicity Explained, and we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to tell you about the rather problematic philosophy of 14th century Franciscan English philosopher and Franciscan William of Ockham. Okay, his razor and also nominalism and why it's problematic and why we all need to know about it. So, quick break. We'll be right back with Back to the Father.
Company of angels
All right, welcome to Back to the Father here on the Guadalupe Radio Network, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And thank you for joining us. Please comment if you have anything that you want to, ask questions or comment about what you are seeing and hearing about this. I want to get straight into William of Ockham because most people probably are not familiar with him. I think most of us have heard of René Descartes and some of the more famous ones like Friedrich Nietzsche and maybe Georg Hegel and some of the better-known philosophers. I think William of Ockham is a little bit of a mystery to people, but I would say extremely important to understand him. And, no philosopher is 100% wrong about everything. And so as I learned from watching that Dr. Cuddeback video, he made a clear point of saying, we don't condemn the philosopher, we condemn the philosophy. And so much of what William of Ockham teaches, especially nominalism, is really bad. Okay, but this is not a ad hominem attack on William of Ockham because he was a Catholic, friar, so I don't know, but we'll let God sort that out. But, as you look around at what's going on in the world today and you see just crazy thinking. You see like a large portion of our population accepting things that they wouldn't even have accepted 10 or 15 or 20 years ago with transgenderism and just kind of this, I can create whoever I want to be. and make myself into whatever I want to be. And that's existentialism. I mean, that's Nietzsche, that's Sartre, and this is clear. This is what existentialism is that you're born with existence, and then you create the essence. All right, so that's not a stretch. But who influenced the existentialists? There's more than one answer, but you got to go back to William of Ockham. And so let me try to explain as best I can William of Ockham and the razor and also nominalism. And if I'm successful, you'll walk away 20 minutes from now saying, okay, I understand that a little bit better than I did before, and then I'll be successful. Okay, so you see this slide here. He was an English Franciscan friar and scholastic philosopher. So he did live during the Scholastic period. You see 1285 to 1347. St. Thomas Aquinas died in 1274, so Ockham was born approximately a decade after Aquinas died. So they never were alive at the same time, but he came right afterwards. And so as he grew up, he certainly would have been very familiar with Aquinas and certainly Aristotle and Plato as well. And that's who he kind of rebelled against. He's considered a religious and political maverick. He had very different ideas. He kind of rocked the boat a little bit. Some people like that, but I think it was problematic. He was called before a papal commission in Avignon, France in 1324. And this is, as I mentioned, this is the Avignon papacy, where the papacy had been moved from Rome to France, and it was Catherine of Siena who eventually helped to get that moved back to Rome, and excommunicated in 1328. I don't honestly know all the reasons he was excommunicated. It did have something to do with the relatively new formation of the Franciscans and the Dominicans, and they were mendicant orders, and some of the church leadership didn't like the fact these new orders, and so I'm not 100% sure that it was because of his teaching, but he did get excommunicated in 1328. All right, he's best known for his famous Occam's razor. Well, let me try to explain this as best as possible, okay? The kind of fancy philosophical language is that entities are not to be multiplied beyond necessity. Okay, so what does that mean? In the next line, you see the simplest answers the best. No unnecessary complexity. Okay, so it's the razor is kind of like shave off those things that are not necessary. All right, I've been watching a lot of videos this week, and one example I'll steal in the next slide, William, if we may, is let's say you have a child, and your child has a bathroom, and you walk in one day, and the bathroom looks like this. Okay, it's an absolute total mess, and so you ask the child, you imagine that it's just your child, your kid's is a slob, okay? And over a period of a week or two, they're just not putting stuff back, and it ends up looking like this. Okay, but your child says, well, what actually happened, Dad, was there were like some fairies that came in during the night, and it was very clean, and then all this got really complicated and messed up, and so I had nothing to do with it, right? Now, that's kind of an extreme example, but Occam's razor would say, you know what? We can't see fairies, okay? So that's an entity that we're going to shave off because I've never seen a fairy. I don't know that they exist, but I do know my child, and I do know that they're capable of messing up their bathroom. And so between those two options, I am going to apply Occam's razor and say, I don't think it was the fairies that messed up the bedroom. It was actually my kid, okay? So you can see in that case, Occam's razor, and we'll go back to the original slide now, William, kind of worked, right? Because it's like, that's a little far-fetched, okay? I got to make some assumptions. I got to play a little, philosophical gymnastics in order to believe that one. But the problem with the razor is that he applied this to scholastic philosophy. And he said the scholastics, Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, and then, going into, people like Aquinas, they're kind of stretching things, and they're making things more complicated than it needs to be. All right? And this is what leads us into his nominalism. All right? So nominalism is really, really problematic, okay? The opposite of nominalism is realism, Okay, and let me see if I can explain this. And you're probably thinking, why do you have pictures of frogs on the screen? And I will, I promise, explain this. Okay, universals. Okay, so I have 3 frogs on the screen. These are 3 individual, separate frogs. Okay, a realist like Plato or Aristotle or Aquinas would say these 3 frogs, there's something real about frogness in them, okay? There is a nature, there is an essence, there is a form, there's something that they share that's real, okay? It's a real thing, okay? This what philosophers call frogness, okay? The essence. They're not just 3 separate things that kind of look alike. The nominalist would come along and say that we see these 3 things, they kind of look alike, they seem to act similarly, and so we attach a name to them, okay? We call them frogs. Okay, there's nothing real in them that is like in their essence, but it's just a name we give to them. It's just a kind of a convenient thing because they all kind of look alike and they act alike, and so that's what they are. They're frogs. The realist, like think about like Plato, for example. Plato had this separate universe of forms, okay, where there was a form of frogness and a form of, even things like justice, and there was a form of human nature, okay, these ideal forms, and Plato believed that all the material representatives of these things were not really real. The forms were real, and these just kind of participated in the form. Okay, so that wasn't great, but he definitely was a realist. He believed that there was a real frogness. And so Aristotle comes along and says, no, the forms are actually in the individual things. Okay, so the frog's form is in that frog. Okay, and the key here, and then Aquinas comes along and he says, yeah, and you know what else? Those forms originally existed in God's mind. Okay, so this is the key, and this is why nominalism is so problematic. Okay, so let me just read this last part. Okay, the nominalists would say that the universals, okay, frogness, birdness, snakeness, okay, these are universals. When I say snake, I'm just talking about a universal. Okay, so William may be thinking about a copperhead, and Manny may be thinking about a python, and I'm thinking about a grass snake. Okay, but the universals say, yeah, but they all share something. There's something real in each one of those creatures that is called snakeness. The nominalist says, no, they just kind of look alike, and we've attached this name to them, and so they're just snakes, but that's it. It's just something that we've attached to them. And there's nothing really real that they share, okay? There's no natures. All right, so they say they only exist as human constructs and not in reality. And in reality, everything is singular, a particular thing. So the nominalist would believe that Manny Ortiz is a singular individual creature, and William Kirkendall is, and I am, okay? And we kind of, there seems to be something kind of similar. We all kind of look alike and we act alike, but that's the end of it, okay? The realist says, no, there's a nature there. Okay, and the nature comes with expectations. It's like let me give an example. If you see a frog, frogness implies being able to jump and having a tongue that comes out and gets food. And there's certain, like a frog can be a good frog. It can fulfill its nature if it's doing things that frogs do. Okay, does that make sense? Whereas if you saw a frog and it had a broken leg and it couldn't jump, or it would, not that it's a horrible frog, it just has its misfortune, but it's not fulfilling frog nature, because frogs are supposed to jump. Frogs are supposed to. There's something about a frog that is a perfection of its nature. All right, so let's go down to the next slide, past the dirty bathroom. And William of Ockham rejected essences and natures and things. Okay, so there are no natures. All right, there are no essences. There's just these individual things that we attach names to. Okay, so nature is related to teleology, perfection, God's design for the world. Okay, so what we are able to do as realists, what St. Thomas Aquinas did, is that we are able to see something, whether it be a frog or a bird or a whale or a shrimp, and we see not only the individual thing, but we are able to abstract a form and sense the universal. That there is something about these that unite them all together. Okay, and there's something that they are supposed to do, something teleological, which means they're directed towards an end, like ducks flying south for the winter. I mean, that's what ducks do, right? And so that's part of their nature. That's part of what it means to be a duck, right? And so we see these things, and as we see them as universals, we actually are drawn back to God. Because we understand that all of these natures, all of these essences, these universals, first exist not in the realm of forms like Plato said, but in the mind of God. And so as Dr. Cuddeback said so well, and I'll just read a couple of his lines because it's so profound. He said, in the Thomistic kind of sense of this all, the intellect conforms to reality. It comes to know truth by being formed by what is out there. Okay, so our life we're being formed by our experiences. We're coming to know things through universals, right? Not just little individual things. Okay, by our intellect, we become all things. We conform to what is out there. We take everything out there and we have it and we be it. Okay, so there's a really cool relationship between us, the created world, and God. And so God has created the world in order to tell us something about himself. And so let's see, our understanding of perfection is that we see, let me give you one more quote from Dr. Cuddeback. He says, nominalism undercuts the human vocation of discovering and living according to an objective good. Because something that fulfills its nature is good. Okay, we fulfill our nature by fulfilling what it means to be a rational, reasoning creature. A frog fulfills its nature by being able to hop and do what frogs do. So if you eliminate natures, there's no goodness, because goodness itself is a universal. You know, Dr. Cuddeback makes the point of saying justice has to be a universal, because otherwise you have all these individual things that the nominalist will say, well, that's just, and that's unjust. But if there's not a universal of justice, there's no way of knowing what is just, because all these little incidences of justice have to conform to some universal. Okay, so you can see, hopefully, if I'm making any sense, that nominalism messes up everything. And it takes away from God creating a world that we come to know in order to know God, and it puts the basically everything in us, that we go around and we name things, and it's all individuals. And God, and I don't think Ockham saw this. I don't think he was a friar. I mean, he believed in God. He wasn't an atheist, but I don't think he ever saw where this was going to lead. Okay, because in nominalism, there's no universal good. There's no universal evil. There's no universal humanity. There's no natures. Okay, and as I point out here, his nominalism had a big effect on later philosophers like David Hume, who was an empiricist. David Hume thought that all we see are impressions. Okay, so you walk around and it's all sense experience. Okay, it's you see a table, or you see, and it's just sense express. There's really he kind of eliminated all the reason, or certainly all the universals. Immanuel Kant, Jean-Paul Sartre, a very pessimistic existentialist philosopher who said, like I mentioned before, you're born and then you create yourself. And he was just a very strange guy. All right, so I mentioned Plato already and St. Thomas Aquinas, and so this is the problem with nominalism, okay? It eliminates us of being able to group things, to come to know things, to know universals, and ultimately to see the connection between God and the created world. All right, and ultimately, when we're in the driver's seat, and Cutterback also pointed out that it undercuts the intellect, and anytime you undercut the intellect, you're left only with the will. And then the will can create itself any way you want if there isn't an objective good by which the will is being directed. Okay, so take away universals, take away reason, you're left with will, and the will says, I'm untethered. I can do anything I want because there's no objective good that I have to be pointed towards. And so, hey, if I'm a man and I have no objective good by which I'm teleologically being directed to, I think I'll be a woman. I think I'll be a bobcat. I think I can be anything I want. That's the problem. Does that sound familiar in our culture today? All right. So anyways, that's a 20-minute explanation of why we should object nominalism. And I don't know if anybody has commented. It's been a little bit of a monologue so far. But anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we are going to discuss this. And this is where I really want, if you're out there and you're watching, I want to know what you think about it, okay? Did it make sense? I know it's kind of deep, but it's also very important, okay? I promise you, if you listen to that, you at least know more than you did 20 minutes ago, okay? If you want to call in, we'd love to hear from you on the phone, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424, or you can comment on the social media pages that you are watching right now. All right, quick break, and we'll be back with segment number 3 of Back to the Father.
Control.
All right, welcome back to the Father. It's a production of the Guadalupe Radio Network. It's May 12th, 2023, and I have given you a lot of information to chew on over the last 40 minutes. We talked about the simplicity of God, which is the first attribute that St. Thomas Aquinas describes in the Summa Theologica, and then we went into nominalism and Occam's razor and the philosophy of William of Ockham. And Ockham, by the way, is named after a suburb of London. He was from the London area of England. And so this is a time for you to comment on the social media pages, and William will read some of those comments here in a moment, but we have a phone call. And so it's always exciting when we get a phone call. The number, by the way, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And we have Laura who has called in. Hey, Laura, how are you?
How have you been?
I'm doing well. Good to hear from you. Thanks for calling in. I was just telling Manny a little bit of background about you. I don't know how much you want me to share, but of course, I know you well, and you like philosophy. And so, what's your comment or of what's been talked about?
Okay, this is kind of backing up to where is God in everything He creates.
Okay.
Okay. There's this kind of thought that's running around that says that God is in hell because God is in everything He creates. And so those in hell cannot be completely without some kind of presence of God because they carry it with them into hell. And also, someone asked me, why did we used to say He descended into hell? And my quick answer was because the just, who at that time were few but now are many because Jesus rose from the dead, the just couldn't be in the presence of God because Jesus had not died. And He went into what they call hell, where He wasn't, and brought them into His presence in heaven or even in purgatory, either one. But He wasn't there. That's why we called it hell. And I was wondering if you could comment on those.
Yeah, there's actually in the very end of the Summa, Thomas tackles this directly, and I know when I teach my class, we get into that because there's a distinction, like you're mentioning, like the just who died before Jesus resurrected. They call that sometimes Sheol, that region. And then clearly in the Apostles' Creed, He descended into hell. And of course, hell would not exist, and demons and the damned in hell would not exist if God was not holding them in existence. And so God is present in all those things through His power because, again, God created all things, right? So if God, wanted to just abolish them, He could. And so the fact that they still exist means they're participating in God's existence. Okay, so there is a presence of God in the sense of, like if I'm running a remote airplane and it's up in the air, well, I'm present to that because I'm controlling it. I'm operating it, right? In a sense, I don't know if that's a good comparison, but Thomas made a distinction between the way that God, that Jesus, when He descended into hell, was present to those in different regions. And He wasn't, physically present because his body was still, in the tomb. Yeah, but Thomas would say that he didn't even, his soul didn't even go there. But He was there through His power. And he did. I don't think Thomas would say He was there physically. Like Jesus was not in hell, right? But He descended there through His power in order to, mete out the discipline or whatever He needed to do. Okay, does that make sense? Because I wish I had that article that I could read because it's very interesting the way that he kind of differentiates the different presence of God, in different regions like that. But how does that make sense?
Be interesting. Well, I mean, we still have the Mary, where Jesus telling Mary Magdalene, "Don't cling to me; I have not yet gone to my Father," and that was a physical presence. And of course, His resurrected body is not like our body. But that kind of leaves open what he was referring to.
Yeah. So you mean the comparison between that and Mary Magdalene?
Well, he did not go physically into Sheol.
Now Sheol, because that's the just. So, and again, I guess when you say physically, because, Jesus' body was still in the tomb, so he didn't have his body in either places. When he descended, it would have been his soul. And interestingly, and this is a little bit of a side note, but I think it's interesting, Thomas talks about, did his divinity remain in his body, like when he died? And Thomas says yes.
And true, and as long as that stone wasn't rolled away, we didn't know what happened to his body, do we? And
it would have been a corpse, right? Because the soul was gone. It was a corpse, right. But the divinity remained in the corpse. So you had a divine corpse, and then which sounds kind of weird, but and then you have the divinity still in the soul, I would think. But that's what would have descended into Sheol, because that's the land of the just. But I think there's a distinction that soul did not go into hell, but only through his power.
Into hell, meaning, as I said, God wasn't with him at the time, but he came there and brought them into heaven to be with him. And that would make it hell, not the hell of the damned.
Yeah, but there would have been some people in the hell of the damned there also. So you had two different regions, right? You got the just in Sheol, and then you have the hell of the damned. And
so you would see it like Dante, different regions of hell.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while since I've read that.
Disappeared.
I need to read that again. In fact, I haven't read the whole thing, but that would be a great thing to read. I think Dante would have been very much influenced by Aquinas. When did Dante live? He lived probably, I'm guessing, probably around the time of
1300s, right?
Okay, at 30. Yeah, so around the time of Ockham. Yeah, he would have been contemporary of Ockham. I wonder if he put Ockham in hell. He put popes and he put people in hell by name. Yeah. So did you watch the part about Ockham that I was explaining? Did that make sense?
Yes.
The nominalism.
Yes, sadly, you couldn't really clear out, as you said, and you might as well leave it at that. He was excommunicated, but not for that. But he kind of left people in a pickle about what we are as people, as human beings, as children of God made in His image, which is still something that I think the Catholic Church is working its way through.
Yeah, and I think, again, I pick on the transgenderism and all that kind of stuff, but, the fact that that people on a pretty regular basis seem to be picking up weapons and running around killing people, and not to mention something I know is very dear to your heart, the scourge of abortion, and not to mention just the meanness and the bullying, and it's just people don't understand human nature.
They don't understand the dignity of it.
Yeah, but and I think William of Ockham, by not recognizing that there's something called human nature that binds us all together, that's really problematic, because every single person is its own little entity, and there's nothing that's bringing us together. There's no unification. There's no universal human beingness. There's no nature. There's no teleology. We're not directed to any kind of particular end. That just leads to chaos. And
but Ockham's razor is invoked so much with just the thought as let's get it to the essentials.
Yeah.
What are we really talking about here? And like you said, maybe he did not even realize how he was excluding God by setting this forth as a method of examining existence.
Yeah, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he meant well, and I think he was trying to simplify things, and by doing that, he opened up a Pandora's box of craziness. So, Laura, thanks for calling. Good to hear from you. I appreciate very much you being part of the program.
Well, thank you for letting me talk. There's kind of esoteric stuff, but
yeah.
I love listening to you.
Yeah, esoteric. That's probably a good way of putting it, right? Yeah. So, all right, Laura from Dallas, thanks so much. We have time for another call if you'd like to call in. The phone number is 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. We always kind of like to end up the program with something kind of light, because a lot of the stuff we talk about is not, I wouldn't call it light. It's kind of heavy stuff, but it's necessary to talk about. And so I am going to share some trivia about England here in a moment, and I'm going to put Manny and William on the spot. In the meantime, let's see, William, are there any other comments?
First, we got to wake up William. So.
Any other comments on social media?
Yes, let's see. So, Facebook buddy said, I was late in the conversation, but it made sense.
Okay.
So that was
all
good.
right.
That was Facebook. And then on YouTube, there have not been any comments. Oh, wait. No, there have not been any comments recently pertaining to anything you said.
All right. Very good. Well, let's go ahead as we're running out of time here. I'm trying to pick which philosopher to deal with next week. Are you all familiar with Francis Bacon? Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard of the name, yes.
Okay.
I have not. No.
He was more kind of never heard of him. Okay. More of a kind of a scientist than a philosopher. I'm toying with that idea. There's also a guy named Abelard who actually was before Ockham, but I think he would be a little similar to Ockham, so I think that would be a little bit too repetitious. Eventually, I want to get into Descartes. He's, I think, a couple centuries after Ockham, but there's a lot of. I'm going to go somewhat chronologically, and eventually we're going to get into Hegel and Kant and some of these other, of course, Karl Marx, and there's a whole lot of them. Kierkegaard, I'd love to do Kierkegaard. He was one of the first existentialists, but he also was a Christian. So he was a Christian existentialist. That might be a kind of a fun one to do.
Yeah.
And he had a lot to do with like pain and sorrow and angst and things like that. So I think we're going to do Kierkegaard. All right. I think that executive decision has been made. All right. And Adrian was saying in his program today that he wants us next week to talk about the Ascension. Is it next Thursday is the Ascension, right?
Yes, it is.
The Feast of the Ascension. So he wanted to talk about that. And so maybe we'll jump a little bit in the Summa and talk about what Thomas said about the Ascension. Okay, so, all right, here is the question that's I'll ask you guys and see if you know. This is a little bit of English trivia. What is the difference between the UK and Great Britain? Okay, so you have United Kingdom. Now, my wife is a Brit, so if she's still watching, she would know this. What's the difference between the UK and Great Britain? They're often used interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same. This is how I can tell whether or not my wife is still watching. So I think she would know.
I don't know. I mean, is Great Britain like just England, and the UK is like Ireland, England, Wales, Scotland, all those.
The Commonwealth, the whole.
Yeah. Well, that's. I think you're kind of. I think you're close. Okay. The official name of the United Kingdom is actually the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. When referring to Great Britain, which is technically a geographical term, refers to the third largest island of the British Isles. Great Britain includes England, Scotland, and Wales, but not Northern Ireland. So the United Kingdom basically incorporates Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Great Britain does not. So which is interesting because I always thought my wife was British because she was from Northern Ireland. But,
are we doing points on this one? I just wasn't sure.
I don't know who would get the point. I think. Okay. Now this is really interesting. Okay, and feel free to answer at home if you want to guess this as well. You've ever heard? You've heard of the London Bridge. London Bridge is falling down. Right. There's an actual thing. Right. London Bridge. The London Bridge is no longer in London. Okay. Where is if you wanted to see the London Bridge, where would you go? You probably are not going to get this right. Okay. Yeah, you just have to kind of know this or you don't.
You can guess first.
You just take a wild guess. What country is the London Bridge in?
Oh, country. I just thought maybe somewhere else in Britain. Oh, gosh, one country. Let's see here.
It was brought somewhere else.
Yes. Let's see. Never guess. Well, let me just take a stab at that. I'm going to say, I don't know, Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Paula is watching. Okay. She said the UK includes Northern Ireland. Okay. She got it.
Okay.
She said Great Britain is in the Victorian age. UK is all. Okay. And Scott Rogie is watching as well. So he. Okay. So look at that. Scott Rogie got it. He got it. You see what he said? He said Arizona.
What?
He's absolutely right. Scott Rogie, you are the man.
Wow.
London Bridge was transported from London in the 1970s to Arizona.
What?
Oh wow, I did not know
I had no idea.
that.
Isn't that crazy?
I'm
How do you transport a bridge?
Yeah.
Good question.
Isn't that wild?
Wow, I had
Okay,
no idea.
so that I had no idea there also. Okay, the official language of England is English. Okay, that's no surprise. How many countries? This will be your one big contest. Okay, so you win. You rise or fall. You win or lose according to this question. We're also going to let those out there in social media land play as well. Whoever gets us closest. How many countries of the world have English as their official language?
Wow.
How many countries of the world? And of course, it all would be because of England. They were the first. Okay, so if anybody wants to guess out there, go ahead and put your guess in the next 30 seconds, and we will award a winner in the crown of glory here at the end of the program. So, do you want to hazard a guess, William? What are you going to say? How many countries in the world have English as their official language?
I will go with 164.
Okay, 164. Okay. And Manny, what do you want to say?
I will go with 165. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Gosh.
Wow, Scott Rogie says 7.
7. Okay.
7.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm gonna do.
Okay, Paula says 6. So
Okay.
you guys are
Okay. I'm gonna say 31.
31. Okay, so let me see who would be the closest. The closest would be Manny.
Oh,
Really?
interesting. Okay.
There are 67 countries.
67 countries. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whose official language is English.
Interesting. I'm gonna look that up. See which countries.
67.
Yeah.
Well, you got, of course. Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of what they would be. Of course, you got America, obviously,
Yes,
and
yes.
England.
Canada.
I think the Philippines.
Yeah.
Don't they speak English?
The Philippines.
Yeah, I think they speak
Singapore.
English.
Singapore. Don't they speak English? quite a
Yeah,
bit
and
too?
what will be the other ones? Because that is kind of odd. Like, what are they all? What are they all?
Wow.
Okay. Now, yeah, Scott's saying 60. No, he said, wow, 67. Yeah, I could, and boy, 164. You were going high there.
I was going high, yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much, Manny, for filling in. And
Yeah, no
William,
problem.
thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if Sissel is still watching or not. I know she's on her way to the graduation, but I think we'd all agree she made it very easy on us. She gave very detailed instructions, and it went just swimmingly.
Yeah, sweet.
So thank you very much to Sissel. Scott says Belize is the official language of English is their official language. Thanks everybody for watching and participating in the program. Next week we're going to do Soren Kierkegaard, okay? And we're going to do another little lesson on the Summa as well. I don't know what it's going to be, but get on our email list if you're not there already. Back to the Father at grnonline.com. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.